So, hi, I am on with my guest tonight, Sharon Livermore, and I do Heal with the Real podcast to raise awareness of domestic abuse because I felt it was really important through writing my book, Fix Your Future, and then from writing my book, put a self-help section in the back because I knew that the tools that I'd use would be really helpful for other women. And the reason why I do Heal with the Real is because there may be some survivors that haven't got through that process and may need some support or advice or tips and may be able to learn from this podcast. And so my guest tonight is Sharon Livermore, as I said. Do you want to just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for having me on this evening with you. So I, as you said, am Sharon Livermore. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse myself, and I came extremely close to losing my life 7 years ago. I know we are going to go into that a little bit further in a minute. But what I do now is I've turned my experience into what I'd like to think is a positive one as much as it can be, where I now use my story and my personal experience and education that I now have around domestic abuse to educate businesses so that they can really understand the difference that they can make. Often the workplace is only the only safe space potentially that people are away from their perpetrator. So really educating businesses to understand that and give them the tools and the confidence to be able to deal with people that are potentially going through a situation. And if businesses are educated, they can, in all honesty, save people's lives, if not definitely change them.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, that businesses are aware of, first of all, if you need that support and what kind of support you need as a victim, because like you say, that may be their only safe haven, and they go home to that abuse, and that's the only place where they feel that they can be, have that breath and that space from
absolutely.
abuse.
And that was exactly my experience. Work was my only place that I was away from my perpetrator. So it was my safe space. It was the place where I was able to be Sharon. Didn't have to look over, well, I say didn't have to look over my shoulder. I did, because there were situations where he would turn up at the workplace and things. But ultimately, when I was at work, I felt safer than being at home. And for me, the business I worked for worked with me very, very well. But ultimately, I put myself in danger by leaving the relationship, which is when you're most in danger. And I think education around that as well will really save a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we go right back to maybe, I don't know, how far do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? Because for me, when I wrote my book, I went right back to my young days when I was 7, because I knew that all those things working up to when I was in an abusive relationship really impacted me. So I don't know, how far do you go back where you think about those things?
I think for me, when I think about things, I hadn't had the best relationships with men all of my life, shall we say. And each relationship kind of escalated into more abuse. And I think that's one thing that I've learned is people often think you have one abusive relationship, but actually a lot of people, whether they're male or female, go through a lot of abusive relationships, because often when you come out of one, you're very vulnerable. And whether you choose to see it or not, which I chose not to in a lot of cases, you are in a vulnerable position. Of course you are. You've been through an abusive relationship. And then it's so easy for somebody to jump in at that point and almost be your savior. And for me, that's what I always thought. I love helping people. I love seeing the best in people. So for me, there's been many a time that I've been at rock bottom, and then someone's come in and made you feel amazing and been that support that you feel you need. I was a single parent a number of times, and when you're down, you will reach out to people, and if those people around you aren't necessarily your family or your friends, because people have different things going on in their lives, for example, if someone turns out, you know, to reach out to you as a partner, you think, oh yeah, this is brilliant. And that unfortunately did happen to me. You know, my previous situations were nowhere near as bad as my relationship that nearly ended in losing my life, but there were, looking back now, with that with the wise person that I now believe I am, from the education that I have, I can see a lot of those traits, and I can see exactly why I did what I did, which is why it's so important to get people the support rather than them reaching out to another abusive relationship. And I think that is something that can be really hard to put your hands up and say, looking back, wow, there were, you know, I can see that pattern. But ultimately, the one thing to remember is it's never a victim's fault. And I think I battled with that quite a lot. It's never a victim's fault. No one deserves to be treated in an abusive manner in any way, shape or form. So that was something I battled with quite a lot at the start.
Yeah, and I guess that if you don't recognize that pattern, and like you say, that, you know, you're just open to anybody that can give you that love that you're looking externally for all the time, you know, and then you're going to fall into that trap, that abusive trap of, you know, these predators, unfortunately. And like you say, you do then go on to blame yourself. You know, why me, why me? But that pattern just keeps going over and over again, doesn't it? And until you learn.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there is so much you can do as a person, but ultimately it's people, there are people out there that actually you could meet quite quickly after a relationship that were amazing as well. So there's so many different factors that come into it, but I truly believe it's about education and having support. They're the two things that we can change. We can educate people, and we can offer support to people at the right time, so they don't feel that they're in a position where they need to go into another relationship so quickly. I've always gone from one relationship into another fairly quickly until more recently. And again, having that time out to really find myself in between relationships, potentially that would have allowed me to find myself and not feel so dependent on someone. Because although I've always been very independent financially, I've always worked full time, I've always had my own house, my own mortgage. It wasn't ever about the financial side. It was about having that support when you are working full time with two children, being on your own, and having someone that just, oh, I'll cook dinner for you. Okay, brilliant, thanks. So I've always used to try and look for the best in somebody's actions. And it's not to say that now I don't believe in people's actions, because of course I do, but I've just learned so much over the years, and I think that comes from education, and that's why I do what I do, because education is key.
Yeah. So with these relationships, just talk me through a few of these relationships, and what were the signs that you now know as signs of abuse?
Yeah, I think it was more the controlling behavior until obviously I got into the most recent, well, not the most recent one, obviously the one where my husband at that point that tried to take my life. It was the controlling behavior. It was the what I was wearing, who I was talking to, just controlling me to know what I was up to. And I think that for me, I didn't really recognize a lot at the start of things, especially when I was younger as well. I thought that was kind of normal in relationships, but actually it is not normal. You should be able to choose your own identity. You should be able to wear what you want, speak to people that you want. And obviously I know there is relationships where my husband does it now. You know, if I'm out with a friend and I'm like, I'll be back at 11, he'll message me and go, everything okay? Not because he's controlling me. He doesn't care that I'm out till 2, 3 in the morning. That's a genuine concern of just checking you're okay, because you said you're coming home. There's a difference, and I think you learn, I looking back know there was a difference. It was about that control. So yeah, I think unfortunately coercive control is a huge thing, and that can take so many forms, as we know. But for me, yeah, it was very much the where I'm going, who I'm talking to, who I'm seeing, that my relationships in the past have been really apparent.
Yeah. And like you said, when you were young and you've got children and you're single, you're looking for love, aren't you? You're lonely. You're lonely as a single parent. And, you know, you're reaching out for that love. And so the first sign of that anybody gives you it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know, I've got this new person that likes me, and
Yeah.
you know, these bells go off without even thought of, you know, what
Yeah.
can occur.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk me through to what happened with your last relationship and
Yeah.
how that started.
Yeah. So I met my then husband, who wasn't my husband, obviously, it went at the start, but I met him on a sales course that I'd gone on. I was a recruitment consultant at the time. He was the person in the room that everyone thought was lovely. He was the one walking around pouring glasses of water for everybody, just being that really charismatic, confident person. And at that time, I just come out of another relationship that was very controlling, shall we say. And for me, he was amazing. He was, you know, had a business head on. He was charismatic, and I really find confidence attractive in a partner. And he had that confidence. So it was that really swept me off my feet. But at the start, he made me feel like a princess, if you want to put it in that way. There was gifts, there was weekends away, there was shopping. You know, he would buy me clothes. Of course, now it's a sign that I would know is a sign, but I thought it was amazing. But again, looking back, it was clothes that high neck tops, it was skirts below the knee, it was, and that's fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that isn't okay. But it was all of those things that would kind of cover me up more so. But initially it was amazing. It was fantastic. We got on really, really well. And it was only really when we got married that things really did change. And it was almost, I was his property. He could tell me what to do, where to go, who to speak to. And every day became a challenge. There was physical abuse, not every day, but there was physical abuse involved. And when there was physical abuse, it was not nice. It was quite severe physical abuse. There was, for me, it was the emotional side of things that I found really hard to deal with, because a physical hurt, it hurts and then the pain goes. The emotional abuse, the worrying about being home from work on time, because otherwise I'd be accused of, you know, who knows. I wasn't allowed to see my friends. He would make excuses not to see family. And I almost became this person that, well, actually, I didn't know who I was. I'd lost my confidence. I'd lost every single part of me, really. And it was only at work that I was still able to be me and be confident. But in all honesty, it was an act at that time, because I was just fighting through each day to keep myself safe, to just almost conform to what he wanted. And then it came to a head when the business that I worked for had a really, really good month in terms of the finances, and they wanted to celebrate. It was about me, so they'd arranged for a dinner out, and obviously I was like, no, I can't go, because he won't let me. But when it's about you, what do you say to your boss? Actually, no, I can't go. And it just came to a head. He basically forced me into a corner where I think he thought that I was going to choose him, and I was potentially going to lose my job, or things would have got awkward at work. But actually, I chose to get me back. And I just went for it. The spare of the moment, it just came out. I just blurted out in the workplace, I'm done. I need to sort this situation out. And yeah, that's when I went to the police and obviously told them what had been going on. He was then caught. He was then, unfortunately, he was bailed because there wasn't enough evidence. But it was then at that point that he plotted to take my life, which obviously I didn't realise. I thought I was safe. I thought I was out of the situation, and I was, looking forward to finding myself again. But yeah, unfortunately, that's when I put myself most in danger.
Can we just go back to the emotional abuse? Because I agree completely that the emotional abuse is the thing that scars you the most.
Yeah.
And right at the beginning, you said there was, you know, gift buying, which we all know as love bombing.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they do to win you over in the beginning of the relationship. But then the emotional abuse, that's the thing that really scars you and can scar you for a long time. I know for me personally, I thought I was healed 8 years later, thought I was fine. But actually, I realized that I'd been quite scarred from, you know, the abuse.
Yeah.
And you don't realize. So talk me through after the emotional abuse, how you dealt with that. Was there anything that you
Yeah, I think the emotional abuse is hard to get over, because things do stick with you. I think for me personally, I knew what he was doing was wrong. There was never a point that I thought it was okay. It was just I didn't know how to get out of the situation. So finding myself again gave me my confidence back. And I think, of course, there was the things, you look awful in that. No one's ever going to want you. All of those things talking about my appearance, which, as we know, it completely knocks your confidence. The controlling side, I actually ended up with anxiety really, really badly, which took me quite a long time to get over. And don't get me wrong, I still have moments now where anxiety will arise in my life. But because I know what anxiety now looks like, I know how to deal with it and process it. I think, in all honesty, my biggest thing is that I now help others. And that's given me my confidence back. And I choose every morning to get up and be grateful because I came so close to losing my life. It gave me a really different outlook. And in all honesty, I'm not scared of things anymore because of that. It's almost like if I've gone through that, no one could say anything worse to me. No one can do anything worse than he did to me. So actually, why not push yourself out there? Why not empower others that are potentially going through that? And don't be wrong, it's not easy because it does stick with you. And I think that's something that everyone needs to recognize. It will always trigger. There'll always be times when that little person pops up in your head and you think, no, I don't look good today. And actually you have to go, no, I do look good today. And you have to learn to love yourself again. And I did it in the most ridiculous ways. That he wouldn't let me listen to certain types of music. So as soon as he's got out of my life, I went into Tesco's, be it 7 years ago. Spotify it probably was around, but didn't really know it that well at that point. I went into Tesco's and I literally bought every single CD that I wanted. And I played them full blast in my car, which is ridiculous. But actually, I was finding me again. And I went on a long journey with that. I would say it probably took me a good 2 years to really find out who I was, even down to my hair color. He wanted my hair color dark, didn't want it blonde. And it was a case of, right, okay, I'm going back to my blonde highlights and things. Finding what I like to wear again, finding my confidence to then set up my business that I did. And in all honesty, I probably would have never had that confidence if I hadn't gone through what I did. So it is hard. And I think everyone finds it challenging in different ways.
Yeah, and I think you're so right. It takes a lot of confidence to speak up when you've had that situation happen to you, and it also can trigger you. But once you go within, like you said, and you've got that tool belt that when that trigger comes up, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to process it, then you're okay. And I think, like you say, the more that you can go help other women, the more powerful you feel as a person. Absolutely. Because you're helping other women, speak and be their voice.
Yeah. And I can't echo that enough. Every time I speak and I share my story, which is obviously quite traumatic, everyone always says to me, why do you do this to yourself? Why do you share this story every time? And I'm like, because that is my reality. And I've learned, I'm at peace with my reality, if that sounds right. I know what happened to me was horrendous. I know it was wrong, but actually it did happen to me. So I make a choice to either embrace that and say that did happen to me, but it's not going to define me in the way that he would want it to have defined me. It defines me in the way that I choose it to. And that's when I'm speaking to victims or survivors, that's what I encourage them to do, is to almost become at peace with what has happened, because you can't change it, but actually you can use it to your advantage in a lot of ways, because they say people that have gone through abuse are the strongest people. Absolutely. So you have an inner strength that you don't know you have. And once you find that, whatever you choose to do, whether you just choose to be at peace and embrace who you are, then that's fine. If you choose to speak out, then again, it's fine, but it's your choice. And you make those choices every day.
It's forgiveness of yourself, isn't it, as well? That's the key thing. So let's go back to your story. We got to where you went to the police. You thought you were safe. What happened next?
So at that point, obviously he did get taken into custody, but he got bail. I started kind of rebuilding my life from day one, in all honesty, thinking I am free from this perpetrator of mine.
Yeah.
And you know, I was tired, I was exhausted, but I had a fight in me that was, okay, I've got to find me again. What I didn't realize that he was at that point plotting to take my life. So this happened on the initial thing when I went to the police was on a Thursday. He then got bail, released on bail on the Friday. I went back to, obviously was at work on the Monday and Tuesday. Then on the Wednesday, I went to put a non-molestation order through in the family courts. So I'd done that, I'd done my research, I'd gone with the office manager who I worked with. So we'd gone together, had a bit of support, which was great. Came back to work, and I worked in an old barn, beautiful place. But as you can imagine, it wasn't like a big, you know, business park.
Yeah.
So 5:30 came, I went to my car and it was dark, it was November. The office manager was parked next to me. Now we had an ongoing joke a lot of the time where she would, because my car was newer at the time, her car would be steamier, and as you know, when it's cold, I'd like wave at her and off I go, and she'd still be demisting, or I'd always go before her. Well, on that day I got in my car, she got in her car next to me, and she drove off. And I was like, hold on a minute, why is my car steamed up? So it was dark, there was a few street lights, just a few, so I could see. So I looked behind me and I was like, oh, thank goodness he's not there, he's not in the seat. And I thought, you know, I've been to court, my emotions are heightened, as they would be. Stop being silly, Sharon, come on, let's just go. And then I smelled aftershave and I was like, no, this is not right. And it was that smell that saved my life, because at that point, I then put my hand behind me in my footwell of the car, and I felt a picnic blanket. Now I have OCD, so I knew at that point that it was in the boot. So I opened my door, the car was running, went round to the boot, opened the boot, and in the boot was lying my husband. He had knives, cable ties, as I'm told now. And what he'd done was he'd actually spent 2 days preparing to effectively murder me. He'd angle grinded through my house door during the day, the back door. He'd gone in, he'd stolen my spare car key. He had then driven to near where I worked and left his car. And then what he then did was got into my car, but what he'd done was loosen the seats, so that if I'd have driven off, his plan was to come through, and he had a knife, and would have then just, well, I don't know what it was obvious what he was going to do. And the detectives and in court, they know what he was going to do, but I don't know, because they never wanted for me to be able to relive what would have gone on from there. Fortunately for me, I ran and I screamed really loud. He did chase me, he did catch me, but I managed to go down and protect my head and my chest area from obviously abuse that he'd done before. But very quickly at that time, one of my colleagues was there and she came running out and pushed him. And another two gentlemen that were in another office came out, and yeah, he drove off in my car. So at that point, I don't really know what I thought. I remember being on the phone to the police and just saying, please get my children, because my next thought was he was going to go to my childminders where my children were. And yeah, the rest of that evening was a bit of a blur, in all honesty.
Wow.
But he was captured, and he was obviously in prison. He has since been released recently. But yeah, it was a moment in my life that I do relive. I have flashbacks now. I have triggers now when I go into the car in the dark. There is just this thing, I check it, and that will live with me forever. So that is part of my trauma that will live with me. But I think the thing is, for me, I know how fortunate I am, and I know that there's a lot of people that don't have their voice. They go through similar situations, they don't survive. So me having a voice and being able to do things like this and talk to you and share my experience, which I hope will help others, educating businesses, really, I know from that is already saving lives. So that's why I find the inner strength, I think, to carry on doing what I do.
That's amazing. To then go and do that. So talk about the policies and things that you've set up as a result of that, and your new business that you've just told me about, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so I first of all set up my own recruitment company 5 years ago, Cameo Recruitment, named after my 3 children. I set that up because I knew I needed a platform to be able to start my journey on the domestic abuse side as well, because Cameo Recruitment has funded a lot of the domestic abuse things that I do. So in terms of putting on seminars for businesses to learn about, that was the initial thing. And that came under the Cameo Recruitment banner. Over the last, I'd say 2 to 3 years, my domestic abuse side has really evolved. And I now I'm an ambassador for 2 charities. So the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse and the Domestic Abuse Alliance as well. So I speak regularly alongside them where I share my story. But me personally, I now do sessions for businesses, almost consultancy, where I share my story, but I talk about the signs of abuse, all the different forms of domestic abuse that people really do not know about. They assume, unfortunately, a lot of it is they assume it's still the violent side. It's not. It's the coercive, the control. It's the economic abuse, all of those other forms. So I talk about that. I talk about the signs to look for in the workplace, and then how to start a conversation. But most importantly, how to create a safe space in the workplace for people to bring in external support and signpost to the external sources of support that are there, because businesses don't have the knowledge or tools to save someone, but they have the spaces to bring in that external support. So my journey's gone down that route, which has been fantastic. But off the back of that, during COVID, I realised that there's a lot of businesses that were happy to listen, but then they were like, what do I do next, Sharon? And I'm like, you need a policy. Of course, you're a business. You need a policy and guidance. So, and that comes at a cost. Or it did come at a cost, until I collaborated with the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, the DA Alliance, and HR Debt to consultants across the UK. And we created Sharon's policy, which is a free domestic abuse template policy that any business can implement. And it basically has the initial policy, so the legal documents of a policy that have been legally checked by Hogan Lovells, who are a global law firm. And then it has the guidance notes. And effectively, those guidance notes are for each individual business to work through and see what they can implement. Because I appreciate some of these big companies have £5,000 flea funds that they can give to their employees, which is absolutely amazing. But a company with 3 people, they can't necessarily afford to do that. So the guidance notes are there for them to pick and choose what they can implement and really start them on their journey. And that's been hugely successful. Channel 4 have used Sharon's policy as a template. There's King's College in Cambridge, they've used it. And in all honesty, I don't know how many people have used it, because it's free in the IDA toolkit. And you can download it off, or you could download it off the Cameo Recruitment website, which you still can do. However, as you say, I've just set up domestic abuse education as a separate business, which now gives me a greater platform and a greater reach to be able to reach every single business. That would be my dream. And that my mission is that every business in the UK should have a domestic abuse policy in place. So just having that as a separate entity means that I have 2 hats. I have a Cameo Recruitment hat, and then I have my domestic abuse hat. And it just means that I can push forward with the domestic abuse side as well, which is really exciting.
It's really incredible. I'm just super proud of what you've achieved. It's just amazing. It's so amazing. If your business that you worked for, looking back, if they had that policy in place, how do you think things would have been different for you?
It's really hard to say, because you can say in hindsight, we always that. But I think if I was to look back now, if they had the policy, I think I would have been encouraged to have external support come in to the workplace. So for us locally, we have Cambridge Women's Aid. So we would have reached out to them and brought them in, and I could have told them what was going on, and they would have been able to help me create a safety plan. And I think that's the big thing, is that safety side of things. And also being given the options to know what you can and can't do would have been really beneficial. So would it have stopped him doing what he did? Ultimately, I will never know. However, it could have protected me from it happening. And I think that's the biggest thing. And, I speak highly of the business that I worked for, because they did the best of what they knew at the time. And they did allow me to go to the police station during work hours. They did, when it all happened afterwards, they let me use the company car because my car was then impounded as evidence, and obviously I refused to ever drive that car again.
Yeah,
So there was a big insurance thing, which fortunately for me, the detective was brilliant and I managed to get a new car. But it took time, and they allowed me to use the company car, which was great, because otherwise how would I have done my shopping? How would I have got to and from work? So they did do a lot of things right, but there was things also that I now campaign for. So my case went to court 6 months after it happened, and I had to take annual leave, which didn't really sit right with me because I wasn't on holiday. I wasn't having a cocktail, you know, on the beach, which would have been lovely. So that's another thing I campaign for as well, is that businesses have almost like a compassionate leave that's at the discretion of each manager for things like that. But again, I don't blame them. They just didn't have a policy that said that that's what they were allowed to do. So, but I do think, and I do already know that having these policies in place, businesses that I've educated have come forward and obviously said to me, we've helped people since your session. So it's been really, really beneficial.
Okay, and where can we get that policy from if any businesses need that, you know, need that policy and want to download it for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go on to domesticabuseeducation.co.uk, that is my website, and there is a tab that says Sharon's policy. If you click on there, it is downloadable off of there. Also, I would encourage businesses, if anyone is listening, to sign up and become members of the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse. It's free to join, and they have toolkits. Sharon's policy is in their toolkit, and it's a network of businesses that are really standing up against domestic abuse. So if someone is at the start of their journey, obviously coming to me, I can do education, but being a member of IDA, as it's known, is really, really beneficial for them as well.
Okay, and you mentioned that your ex-abuser has just got out of prison.
Yeah.
How was that? I bet that was quite...
Yeah, I think for me, I become at peace with what had happened, and then it kind of relived itself again, and it has been emotional. It's been up and down over the last probably 6 months, and again, you have to find that peace within yourself, and you have to kind of talk to yourself. So many times, like today, I'm in my office, I need to go out, I need to get in my car on my own, my team have gone. It's talking myself through that process and go, it is okay. And it is okay to look in your boot, Sharon, because that's what I will do, just so I feel okay with it. I've been really lucky because I've got a really good support network around me now, with my team who I work with, also my now husband who is incredible and who does champion everything I do. Obviously my children are older as well, and I think, you know, that's really beneficial, is that having them, but ultimately you can only do it yourself, and I think that's the hardest thing. Anyone can tell you anything, but it has been traumatic, it has been triggering. But again, I've used those techniques that I used at the start of just reassuring myself, reminding myself that I'm in a good place. And if I don't feel comfortable, then don't do it, and reach out and ask for help. So, and I think, you know, it's fine it is really fine to have those wobbles and have those moments and realize that, again, it's my reality. And I'm sure just because he's come out recently, yes, it is triggering things, but I'm sure there'll be things that trigger me 10 years down the line. But it's just part of me. And if I let it define me now, I might go, actually, I'm never going to campaign again. I'm never going to go in my car in the dark. I'm never going to meet a friend for dinner when it's dark outside. And no, that's not going to happen. I will continue to do everything that I do, and and keep fighting forwards, because I think that's what every victim and survivor has to do to ensure that they can live their happy life.
Sure. You touched on economic abuse. What is that, and how can as an employer support somebody that may be fleeing and have no financial income at all because that's been controlled by their ex-abuser? How can an employer support that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I unfortunately didn't experience economic abuse. That was one part that I didn't, but 95% of people that are being abused will experience it. There are a number of things that businesses can do. For example, if someone comes forward and they're having their salary paid into the perpetrator's account, stop it. Get that money into their bank account and help them set up a bank account. They may not even know how to if they've been controlled before. Help them with that. Can you provide a loan for them to flee, or pay a deposit? Can you do that maybe they pay back small amounts over the next however long? I know there are big businesses that do provide a flee fund. There's one that I know that has £5,000 that they give to, and it's not paid, you don't have to pay it back. Okay. It's the start of you on a journey. They are a huge global company, but there are many of them that will offer that. I think it's just giving them access to funds when they need it as well. But there's lots of other things around that area that businesses can do. And I signpost people to Surviving Economic Abuse. They are a charity that deal specifically with economic abuse. So even though I educate businesses, I have partners. They're one of my partners on my website that I signpost people to if they want to learn more about a certain area. But there are small things you can do. Just changing the bank account so the perpetrator can't get the funds is one of the things that you can do straight away if that is the case.
Yeah. Amazing. So where are you now? So you're just about to set up the business, or is it already set up as a limited? Is that right?
Yeah, so it's set up as a limited company right now as we speak. However, we're changing it to a community interest company purely because I've already had conversations with people that want to support me and enable me to reach those businesses that don't necessarily have funds to pay for my time. And to do that, you obviously need to be a charity or a kick, as it's known, which I totally appreciate. And obviously this was part of my learning curve on my journey with having a second business. So we're currently working to change that so that I can get funding to offer what I do to businesses that don't have the budget for it. But alongside that, I will still continue to educate the larger companies, the global companies, the ones that do have funds that I can then reinvest back into potentially in the long term. I think I'd like to be able to almost gift it. So if there's a larger company that says, yeah, we have a budget for this, we can give you this, I can take my time out and then gift another session to a smaller business for free if they don't have it. So that would be a long-term thing, which I think a lot of bigger businesses or larger companies would like to do, because they're then helping. But yeah, I would say we're at the start of the domestic abuse education journey, but we're not at the start of my domestic abuse journey, because I have been doing this for a number of years now. But I'm really excited to see where I can take it in its new form and its new entity, really.
It's incredible. It really is.
Thank you.
What would be a typical day? My final question before we go. What would be a typical day for you? And what would you say that would really support somebody that may be just going through that journey at the moment where they're wanting to flee? So 2 questions, really.
2 questions, yeah. So 2 questions. I'll answer the first one first. So my typical day, it really does vary, because one, obviously I have my recruitment hat on and I have a team of people on the recruitment side. So I'm out meeting clients, talking about the people that they want for their jobs. But at the same time, I'm always pushing the domestic abuse side as well. So I almost have 2 sales hats on, in the sense of I'm trying to get people to listen about recruitment, but also I'm speaking to the right people, because HR people tend to be the ones that get involved in the recruitment. It's the HR teams that I'm then speaking to about the domestic abuse side. So that's part of it. I can be doing talks like this. I can come onto podcasts and share my story. The last month I've been at different events where I've been listening and educating myself more about domestic abuse and different types. I've spoken at Hertfordshire NHS Trust, so shared my story with them alongside the Domestic Abuse Alliance. Next week or 2 weeks time, I'm going to a business park in Cambridge where I am, and I'm educating I think there's 11 businesses on the hope that the site leads are coming to listen, and then I want to then go into each individual business to educate all of the workforce. So it really varies, which is what I love as well. I am 100 mile an hour. You can probably tell that from how fast I speak.
What about self-care for you? Do you have a self-care routine that you do on a daily basis? Okay,
so if I'm honest, I need people to tell me to stop, my husband being one of them. I would keep going 24 hours a day if I thought I was saving people. because I know how fortunate I am to be here. But self-care is really important.
Yeah.
So I do take time out when I can. Obviously, we're now running two businesses. It is busy, but I have a really good team that support me as well. But I have just booked a holiday. I've booked a week away to recharge, because it is important. And I do feel myself quite quickly sometimes get into that burnout stage of going, okay, I want to save someone else. I want to share my story because I want to save someone else. I want to educate a business. But actually, I know I don't perform my best when I am at that point. So, and that's something, in all honesty, I probably learned over the last year, because I was fighting through COVID with the business. Then that continued. And then I realized, whoa, okay, I can't do everything. So, self-care is really important, and part of that I find is socializing with my friends and actually sharing my story with them, and sharing what I've been doing with them, should I say, not my story because they know my story, but that really does help. And I think, to answer your second question, in terms of if someone was listening that potentially was going through it, I think reach out in a safe way to somebody, whether that be a family member, a colleague, someone, your doctors. They've got all these other opportunities where you can get support. So ask for Annie. Banks are now working as well to create safe spaces, Boots as well, for example. But start that journey for yourself, but do it in the safest way. And that's where I went wrong, whether you call it wrong or not.
Sharon, just tell me about Ask for Annie for people that don't know what that is.
So that is where you can go. That one, I'm not going to get this 100% right because I always get them muddled up. It's where you can go into Boots, for example. It may be safe spaces. They're very similar, or hospitality places. So there's a number of places now that you can go into, and you can ask for Annie effectively, and they will take you to a safe space to get support. The other thing that's really, really useful for people is called the Bright Sky app. Now, it's an app that you can download on your phone, which looks like a weather app. So to a perpetrator, it will look like the weather. But actually to a victim, they can go into it and they can look in their local area what sources of support are there. And I think that's really important, because what, for example, is here in Cambridge is completely different to what's in the next county. So you can go on that and actually look at and access that support that you can get, whether that be a helpline or a website or an online chat as well. But just realize there is so many people out there that want to help, and they will support you. I know it's not easy, and I know leaving is scary, because if you've had someone that, even though they're the horriblest person to you, they're still there. If you've got no one else, it can be really lonely. And that's often why people do go back again and again and again. But ultimately, if we can get, or you can get, these people, if anyone's listening, the network around you to support you, whether that be other victims that have come out, and create that support network, then at least just start doing the research into starting a happy, abuse-free life.
Yeah. And it's important, isn't it, for me, it was really important about going into myself and doing that inner healing, and knowing that actually it's all right to be alone. It's okay to spend time on your own. And that, and not be looking externally for that love. I think for me, it was that self-love, and doing that, positive affirmations, doing my journal on a morning, doing my workout. So I felt good about myself, because I know that you touched on earlier in the podcast that when you through the emotional abuse, when you're told that you're fat, you're this, you're that, nobody else will ever want you. You have to do that. You have to go inside and do that work and say, actually, I'm bloody all right.
And do you know what? I am who I am, and you love me for who I am. And it's like my perpetrators say, oh, you look really fat in that. And that's really hard to hear. And I think, social media doesn't help when people look a certain way. But I'm at peace with myself now. I enjoy a cake, And before I would never have had that confidence. Whereas I'm not, I'm not a size 8, but I embrace who I am. I love who I am, and I love what life I've got. And I think you do have to look inside yourself for that. No one can give you that. And you have to find that inner confidence, which does take time. So I think sometimes people see people that are in the journey that I am further down the line. I'm 7 years since I left him. And people that speak to me say, how can I be like you? And I'm like, it doesn't happen overnight. You need to take it at your own pace, but you can get there. And just because I come across like this doesn't mean I don't wobble at any point, because of course I do, because I'm human. So it's being real, and I will wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm 100% honest. I can come across like this, but it may be in a few days' time that something triggers me and I'm like, you know, and I have a wobble. And I think it's being kind to yourself, and just, you know, love yourself for who you are, because once you learn to love yourself, then other people are in your life for the right reasons, and they're not there trying to hold you up for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and you can't give love externally if you don't love yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Sharon, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for everything that you do to support women that may be going through domestic abuse or surviving and thriving, and for coming on the podcast and being so open and vulnerable and honest.
No, thank you for having me. It's like I say, without people like yourself that give me the opportunity to speak, if this one person listens to this and it gives them some support or some encouragement, or just makes them feel a little bit more at peace with their situation, or helps them get out of it, then we've done our job. And if it happens to more than one, then that's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I couldn't do what I do without collaborating with others. So thank you very much.
And thank you for coming on. Bye.
Bye.